Hello, welcome to PCA Youth Center. I'm Iris, and today we have a special guest, Chris Ference, who is a student at Rochester Institute of Technology, where he studies speculative design. His recent work includes exploring generative tools that can be utilized by other architects and designers to facilitate their workflow. Please welcome Chris Ference.
Alrighty. Hi again. My name is Chris Ference. I'm a designer. I'm currently based in Rochester, New York, but I'm from Pittsburgh. And yeah, I was kind of asked to share a bit about kind of the future of design and kind of where I see that going. But I'm just curious, kind of like what everyone's background is. If you can either like type in the chat or just say out loud, kind of like if there's any particular field that you're interested in within engineering, design, like STEM in general. And I'd be kind of happy to talk to some of those points. And if not, we can just kind of go through the presentation that I have. But yeah, is there anything in particular that you guys are interested in? Computer science, Lena, okay. Wonderful. Well, we'll definitely kind of touch on some of those points. So, cool. Let me go ahead and share then. Yeah, so I'm from like the North Hills area in Pittsburgh. I don't know if there's a center for the PCA, but yeah, North Hills, Hampton areas. So came to Rochester 3 years ago now. So, but alrighty, we'll get started. And feel free to interrupt me along the way with any questions that you may have about any sort of topic. So, all right, the new wave of designers. So I think today's objective is to answer this question: what will be the responsibility of designers in the future? So I'm going to kind of give an overview of some of the different traits of designers and some of the different kind of careers that exist right now and careers that are going to be created or more developed in the future. And then also giving all you guys a place for kind of where to start. There's some different resources online and different camps and such that you can attend to kind of get a jump start on design, in your design or STEM career. So yeah. So just a bit of background about myself. As I said, my name is Chris, and I'm 21. I'm a designer, and I'm currently based in Rochester, New York. I'm studying at RIT, which is the Rochester Institute of Technology. And this is some of my early work when I was still a high school student in Pittsburgh, doing some just like very, very basic sketching. I made this like little phone stand thing before, and then also just like some different lighting and such I was kind of playing around with. But a lot of my, I had kind of had emphasis on prototyping and making things with my hands instead of necessarily drawing. So I'm probably more impressed by the right two rather than the sketch there on the left. But I'd also done a lot of prototyping, like I mentioned, and just like playing with paper to kind of start to ideate on some of these different forms. So this is the kind of a thought for a planter. What if they could kind of hang? This other thought was like, if it's like a piece of bent sheet metal, how could it form to create this kind of like opening for the plant? And yeah, just kind of playing around with some different paper and again, kind of coming up with some interesting solutions. And then that kind of turned into this. So obviously a lot of steps along the way, but yeah, playing around with, how do you take photos of something like this and how do you create something that's really visually appealing and creating, this like image style and such through kind of like digital rendering on the computer. So this is like, just as the kind of pandemic was hitting, I guess. And again, like I mentioned, a lot of prototyping, a lot of model making. This is a big part of my process just to kind of get things in hand and starting to understand, how that feels. And I guess just to go along with that, and like I touched on before, a lot of my stuff kind of in high school and a lot of my work was kind of making things. So I don't know if at your high schools you have access to things like a laser cutter or 3D printer. A lot of that work was just like playing around with those machines and trying to understand, what you can do with them. And pushing them kind of to the limits and seeing, if you can just like spend time working with those, I think you'll get a lot of kind of creativity on how do you move forward with your design. So yeah, definitely an interesting part of it. But that kind of kettle turned into this, and it's kind of some of the renderings for that. And then yeah, just some like other sketching and such, and a little bit better fidelity. These are some sketches for this like bag that you can have for your like taking your dog for a walk. And this is actually a company based in like Wexford area called Spruce. And we ended up designing this, and it launched in end of 2019 or 2020. So pretty exciting, exciting time. But yeah, and then as you know, in March of 2020, COVID hit, and I kind of, I think that's how we're all feeling, right? And kind of a little bit sad. But I think one of the major realizations that I had during COVID was making pretty objects and really beautiful forms wasn't enough. So, designing with a little bit more meaning, and leaning more to like the technical side rather than just the art side of design. Obviously there's a value in both, but I think for me, what it fit better to do this more technical side, or the side that was a little bit more experimental. It wasn't just purely about, physical products. So at this point I started to experiment. This is a tool that I kind of created. I was doing a lot of programming, and I know that in the chat here, Songgrong talked about computer science and typography, and Lena mentioned computer science as well. So this is kind of I went from design to computer science, but you could definitely go the other way. And I was learning how to code, and this is with processing. It's a free software, and I was able to create this program that generates, or it takes an image, it takes different colors from that, and it creates a result. So here it's generating a color palette for a chair, which is kind of interesting. So you're taking, image to palette to product. So just a different kind of take on design compared to what I'd seen before. And these are some of the kind of final images from that. It was a really fun project. But yeah. And then some other recent work. This is kind of for a plotting machine. And yeah, it was interesting to play around with, again, like the art direction and how do you tell a story about what this product does. This is a similar thing with like kind of creative coding, and yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. And with that, I was able to generate these different patterns, and this kind of robot kind of draws out these different shapes. So yeah, that was kind of some more fun experiments and a little bit different from traditional design work. And then also during that kind of time of questioning and experimentation, I created this kind of with coding. I created all these different works on the left. So different kind of generated forms and taking, pulling images or colors from images, and you turn those into different graphics and patterns. And then I ultimately compiled those kind of 100 experiments into a book that I called Generated, a book of experiments. And yeah, I think I made 100 books. So yeah, it's kind of a fun thing to do, and kind of give to friends around the country. And then also I've been doing a lot of like branding work. So how do you kind of identify this like brand language for yourself, and creating business cards and other things like that. So anyways, that's a bit of background about myself. But I think the main thing there is like realizing that I started with design, and I wanted to move more towards computer science and some of these other things. So it's important to note that you can kind of switch and you can play at the space in between design and computer science, or because that ultimately makes you a more interesting designer whenever you have, or an interesting computer scientist, when you come at it from two different perspectives. That makes you really unique, and something that a lot of other people won't have. So but we'll move on to some of these traits. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me or put them in the chat. But I think traits of a designer, or just kind of a creative, have these kind of 5, and these aren't exclusive or limited to these, but kind of 5 that I recognize, at least in myself. This ability to be curious, and kind of question the future. There's this really interesting kind of studio called Space 10, They do a lot of kind of experimental work. This is a project that they did with kind of bee homes, but they were kind of curious about what does the future of of bees look like on the planet, and how do we as humans facilitate that. So by creating these different bee homes, it kind of allowed people to engage in their communities and actually kind of produce these really beautiful objects. And they have a lot of other experiments on their site, but it's called Space 10. And I'll have links and such at the end, so you don't have to capture that right now. I think another trait of this new designer is someone that's interdisciplinary. So being able to work at this in-between space of engineering and design and computer science and all these different things to ultimately create a product that is really unique. So this is a headphone designed by the firm Nonfiction, and they really focus on creating these like really wild designs and things that are very they're imagining the future, and they're starting to kind of like bring that into reality. So this kind of like interesting form that it's kind of hard to even like comprehend how this works, but it kind of just like snaps onto your ear. And yeah, it works really well, and it looks futuristic. And they made like thousands of models and prototypes of this, but it took like an interdisciplinary team of people from a lot of different backgrounds to make something like this possible. So I think that's just another really important trait to have as a designer. And I think it's also really important to be conscious. So where's your product going to be going after it's after it's used, right? Does it go into a landfill, or does it biodegrade? But and also considering all the different places that your product exists whenever it's all the different places it exists. So from the packaging that you first see it at with at the store, all the way to using it every day, to whenever you have to repair a part, like how does that system work? But just really be considerate and conscious about that whole process. I think it's also very important to be collaborative. Again, to the folks that were interested in computer science and design, this ability to, you kind of have a superpower because you can code and you have that ability, but also having this like lens of design allows you to create these really interesting visuals and such. So this is done by a kind of a computer scientist and designer in California, and she did these really interesting experiments with dance. So she made these like graphics based on kind of videos and such taken from as dancers were moving and such throughout the performance. And this is kind of, you can see here her kind of like body, and then that's like projected onto this like digital space. So it's kind of interesting how you can go about doing this work and like at the different scales that it can be. Like it's a really large scale being projected on the wall. And I think it's also really important to be open-minded as a designer and not being scared of not knowing everything. This is a project by, again, that firm Nonfiction, and they explored what the future of living on the moon would be like. So there's not trees or anything that exists on the moon. So having these artificial points of color allows people to, it brings us excitement and hopefully a little bit of joy to that landscape. But again, it's not being scared of designing this thing that you might not know so much about. And then also being open-minded in the fact that you can kind of cross-discipline. So as a designer, I can design a space, like a physical space, a physical product, and being able to bounce between those different things. So some of those traits as a designer can carry over to these other things as well. All right. Any questions yet? I can keep plugging away here if there's none. Alrighty, I think we'll keep going then. So I want to cover some of the existing careers that exist in design, and then I hope to share some of the kind of careers that you might have in the future, careers that are just beginning to emerge, and as design and technology evolves, things that will be more necessary in the future. So most STEAM fields, so again, it's like science, technology, engineering, art, and math. STEAM fields share the same general design process. So you might have seen this chart before or something similar to it, but it's basically giving you this kind of cycle or some sort of graph of how you move about this engineering design process. So it usually starts out with identifying some sort of problem, criteria, and doing research, brainstorming, generating ideas, exploring possibilities, selecting approach, building it, and then refining it, and then kind of repeating that. And again, there's a lot of different examples kind of this. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that a lot of these different careers share that same exact process. So the first one I'll cover here is graphic design. So the ability to create posters, layouts, presentations, and other kind of print graphics is something that graphic designers typically do, along with now something that's been more relevant is like creating graphics for social media. So what does the Instagram story size look like versus a Twitter banner, or whatever other kind of format. So graphic designers have a really big responsibility within companies, and then again they follow that kind of same general process. Industrial designers. So the term industrial designer is kind of interesting. It basically just means like designing physical products. And then whenever you refer to product designer, that's also referring to like designing apps. So industrial designers are the ones in charge of the physical products. This is just some of the process for developing one of the new Google phones. And yeah, I think the industrial designers definitely have that process of starting with some sort of initial question, being able to brainstorm, kind of diverge and think about a lot of different things, and then kind of come back together and create a few different solutions. So here you can see a lot of the exploration, right, of color, button placement, cameras, and a lot of other different aspects of it. And then they ultimately kind of came together on, okay, this is the one design. So yeah. Then you have people that are mechanical engineers. So for a lot of like big companies like Google or Apple, the mechanical engineer is in charge of creating, making sure that this device can be made and produced. So how do we make the part for cheaper? Or what does this tool look like? And doing some other things, again, in regards to manufacturing for these companies. And that's often referred to as like a production engineer, because their ultimate end product is to have this like done on a mass consumption, or a large kind of like production line. So UI designer is, again, like the term product designer. It's designing digital experiences. So UI stands for user interface. And so this kind of person would be in charge of all sorts of different displays, and being able to create these graphics for apps, websites, and other experiences. And this is an interesting part in kind of an intersection between computer science and design as well, because you're designing like how you're interacting with the computer science, right, that's behind it. You're interacting with how you click buttons, and how this is the front end side of that kind of development. So whenever you hear front end developer, they're typically referring to this side of things, where you're creating what that kind of front end experience looks like for the user. And then an information architecture, or information architect, they would be kind of designing like the flow of information as you experience a digital thing. So if it's like your iPhone, for example, you start with like the lock screen, right? And you swipe up, you see your home screen, and there's all these different actions that you can do to get to your different apps and different kind of menus and such. So being the one that organizes all that information, it's really important. And it's kind of arisen over the past few years because of how many different apps and websites we go to, and we need to make it as easy to navigate as possible, and for people to get the information as quick as they can. So something that's also really interesting is design research. So this is like someone that would be doing a lot of the work kind of before the industrial designers or other sorts of engineers and designers like take the project on. So they'd be in charge of collecting like different information about like the user. So like this is like the person that's going to be using this product. So that's typically a certain demographic, like 18 to 24, and that product needs to be like within this price range. So they're able to start to like do research on who's the primary market for this design, what are their needs, what are their trends, like what are they interested in, so that the designers and such can create a better solution for them. So it's just another kind of interesting path with design. And I think with all of these, it's there's a similar process, again, shared between them, but they just have a different kind of point that they kind of work at in that kind of design process, or they have a certain specialty within that. So interaction designers are people that are in charge of these kind of like physical interactions. So if you think about a light switch now, it's like an on and off versus like this is kind of a project exploring like what if it was like you're using the force to control lights and how does it recognize that and how does it sense that. So this is a really kind of interesting kind of future project thinking about interacting with machines and such. And then art directors and storytelling. So people that take imagery and create these different scenes that can be used by companies for branding, marketing purposes, advertising. But it really creates a scene or a certain vibe that the company is going for. So this is not this. I think this is for WeWork, but I wouldn't see Apple doing something like this because it's not their style, right? Apple's style is like sleek, minimal. Versus this kind of more collagey. So it's interesting to think about how certain graphics and such relate to the kind of art direction and the kind of photos that the company takes. Alrighty. So that was some different careers that exist already in design. But this next section is going to cover some kind of careers that are emerging and kind of roles that you might have in the future. So even if you go to school to study computer science, you may kind of pivot and eventually kind of end up in one of these fields. So yeah, don't let your major kind of determine what you're gonna be for the rest of your life. You can always kind of change with that. So these are some of the future careers. So the first I'd like to talk about is creative technologist. This is someone that's exploring new technologies and kind of doing research on these new technologies, and also considering like how we are interacting with, with different future technologies. So this is actually a previous boss of mine, Madeline Gannon. She did her PhD at Carnegie Mellon, and she is kind of known as the robot whisperer, someone that's really making more these kind of like making the relationship with robots more like it is with like a dog or something like that. So she had this exhibit that as you approach this robot, instead of it being very like aggressive, it would kind of move away from you, almost like an animal would whenever you first approach it. So it's really interesting how she took that kind of approach, and she looked at like biology and animals, and then took that to create something that felt more natural for this like large industrial machine. So yeah, really interesting person. Another type of designer is a conversational designer. So as we have more devices like this in our homes, like the Amazon Alexa or like the Google Home, I was seeing if mine was going to turn on there. It's important to consider these kind of interactions that we're having with them. So if you were to say like buy this product, like how does it know that you're not like somewhat like a child in the home that is just trying to get something to order, like order me like Oreos or something, it's like how do you ensure that there's like security there. And there's also just other kind of like ethical questions around this, but the main kind of responsibility of a conversational designer is to consider how language plays a part in these things, and how do you kind of take things that are very human and allow the computer to process those things and give ultimately the user what they want out of that experience. It's also interesting because there's no screen here, right? All the interaction has to be done with your voice. AR and VR design. So that's augmented reality and virtual reality. So what you're seeing in this image is augmented reality, and it's basically like overlaying images or like basically overlaying like 3D objects into a space. So you might be most familiar with these from like Snapchat and Instagram filters, where there's like something over your face and it moves with your face. That's kind of an example of AR. But I think as we move forward, this technology is going to continue to grow and become a little bit more refined. And yeah, it's going to be important to consider how we go about using the technology. And then you guys are probably also familiar with like the Oculus kind of devices for like virtual reality work. And right now, a lot of it is with gaming. A lot of the kind of applications are games. But in the future, maybe this is how we all work. We all put a headset on in the morning, and then we show up in a virtual meeting room, right? or instead of a Zoom call, it's just all done in VR. So something to think about in the future. But we definitely need designers in this space to imagine, what the future of these interactions are that we're having with virtual devices. And these things that whenever you put them on, it's like you're in a totally different space. You shouldn't design it just like an iPhone screen, right? There's no swipe to unlock because the whole space is around you. So we need to consider these new technologies and what they're capable of so we can design better futures for them. So this is kind of gets back to the computer science element that so you talked about it before, but designing AI systems, so artificial intelligence, being able to work with it in order to produce results that are helpful and things that are beneficial to people. So it's really important to consider because you have these really complex machines, but if we can't control them and if we can't get them to do what we want, then it can be kind of again like an ethical question. But it can be become really powerful once you can kind of tell them what to do in the right way. So this is again another way that kind of computer science can be kind of related to design. So human computer interaction design, or HCI design, it's basically kind of considering what our interaction looks like with computers and robotics. And so that first example, I guess that could also be considered HCI design. But this is kind of an interesting example from a professor at Carnegie Mellon, actually. She had created this kind of type of pasta that it had these like certain segmentations at the top, that you can see at the top. And then whenever it is, boiled, it starts to curl in this shape, so it can kind of save space in the packaging, which is really quite clever. So it's interesting how you're able to go about creating a like a computer model of like this piece of pasta, and then you're able to like kind of press it in different ways that allows it to eventually fold and kind of curl in this manner. So this is kind of an weird but interesting example of human-computer interaction design happening in Pittsburgh. And then speculative design. Speculative design is considering the future and designing future scenarios for that. So this is like imagining the future of air travel and what that might look like. So you have in the front there kind of this lounge area instead of just your traditional just like really crowded seats. And then you also have this like the 6 seats in the middle there, they're kind of facing away from each other. Again, it's just a different future of what could possibly be in the future for us. And just imagining those so that you can start to see like, is this something that we want, or is this something we're going to stay away from? Which is also a really interesting thing to do with speculative design. And then generative design. It's this idea of design, like having a designer establish certain parts that are important in the design and allowing algorithms and AI systems to actually kind of start to construct these objects. So in this case, the designers established like we want a chair to have like four legs, and we want this kind of back, and then we want a seat here, but like all those connections and those things in between, those are all generated by the computer. So the computer goes through like thousands of iterations to imagine like what the strength of this object is going to be, how do you optimize like the least amount of material so it saves the most money, to create really efficient solutions that work really well. So this is optimized for material and also weight. So it's like it looks pretty light, but it can hold a lot of weight because they've done a lot of those computer kind of simulations. So again, there's a lot of overlap with computer science here with design, which I think is really inspiring. So yeah, that was kind of a few of the different careers that you might have moving forward. And then I think I'm going to cover next and kind of finally where to start. So there's a lot of different kind of like resources out there to kind of get started with design and learning about it. So the first I want to talk about is different camps and certain events that go on. So I know there's a few different programs at Carnegie Mellon this summer that you can always look into. And I think it's wonderful that they have so many different ones available there. And there's also a lot of online classes from things like Skillshare, LinkedIn Learning, and there's some other things there. Um, and XY, I'll get to your question here in a second. At the end here, almost done. So yeah, so there's just some other online classes. And this is actually an organization I'm part of now. It's called Offsite Design. And there's a section for people that are just getting into this, into like industrial design in particular. So there's people from all sorts of different disciplines part of the program, and they'll be running another session this summer. So I have again like a document of some links that you guys can take a look at. But yeah, Offsite is definitely an interesting experience to learn more about design from real designers practicing in the field. It's a 12-week program that is disrupting design education that offers a real-world view of design through and instruction from industry leaders. So again, feel free to reach out about that. But this is their Instagram account, which is offsite.design. So yeah, check them out if you're interested in possibly doing something like that this summer. And this is actually, I went through the offsite program, and this is kind of one of the things I came out with was this like presentation style that I'm actually showing today, along with some different business cards and some other branding elements. But the program was super helpful, and they kind of also go through some of these different things of like developing forms and like imagining, this is for a hair dryer. It's like, what does it look like? Where does the plug come out of? How do the materials split? And doing a lot of different considerations of this kind of product. Does it fold? Does it twist to change the orientation? So it's kind of interesting being able to ideate on so many different things here. And also networking is really important. Reaching out to people that maybe have gone to your high school, talking with friends of your parents possibly, or even with the PCA Youth Center. I think there's probably a lot of people that are willing to help, willing to reach out. Consider me as part of your network now, and just feel free to reach out if you have any other questions after this talk about things. But networking is a really important thing to do as well. And then also something to kind of continue to be introduced to design and such is to go down these like internet rabbit holes. So I have this kind of document of links that I've made for myself, and I use it to just reference different design studios and people that I think are doing really interesting work. So I actually have kind of a sample of that I can share with you. So that's wraps it up, but I will share this link to the chat, and you'll all be able to access this document. And there might be some interesting things on here that might kind of spark interest there. Yeah, so there's just like all sorts of different kind of websites and people's portfolios and such that might kind of inspire, yeah, some interesting things. So this person in particular, Jamie Wolfond, there's some interesting kind of work with, yeah, all sorts of like home good products. So this is a table that he recently designed. Kind of interesting. Let's see here, some different vases. This is probably my favorite. If it loads here. Maybe not. Anyways, there's a lot of different links here that you can check out. So again, I put it in the chat if you want to take a look at that. But yeah, now I think we'll take some questions. Oops, the doc is not shared. Okay, let me make sure that's, sorry about that. Change anyone with the link. Okay, I'm gonna just link it one more time, Ed. And you should be good to go there. Cool, I think you joined there. Yep, perfect. Cool. So I guess going back to one of the questions that was asked by XY Lee, or Shi Lee, do you need to be an artist to be a good designer? I don't think so. I don't think, I think it's important to understand there's certain basic principles of design that are really critical and things that you don't necessarily realize whenever you're just looking at products. For example, like proportions is really important. Color is really important. There's some different elements to that, but like you don't need to be a painter, right? Like to be a really great designer. You can have a more technical approach to that, or your approach can be with computer science and having a really technical understanding of that, and you can bring that to design and make a real difference. So I think it's important to start to understand some of the principles of design, but I don't think you necessarily have to be like a good artist and again like a good sketcher or anything like that. There's certain types of designers that will need to be a little bit more better at sketching and some of those things, but I think ultimately a designer is someone that's creative, an ability to work with others to create things. So if you're able to do that with your computer science abilities or research abilities, that's just or even more valuable. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm just also curious. Again, I know I asked at the beginning, but if there's any areas in particular that you guys are interested in. I know there's a strong kind of really focus on computer science and also typography, which is interesting. Typography definitely leans more into like the graphic design side of things, but yeah, typography is definitely really important for creating really compelling presentations and such. And I'm also just going to share my LinkedIn here, or sorry, my Instagram. And you can feel free to message me or reach out if there's any other questions. But Lena asks, I also like art, so the careers you mentioned are very interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of different paths that you can kind of go with it. A lot of interesting designers and artists working at this space in between it doesn't have to be purely art, or it doesn't have to be purely computer science and design. So I've kind of done a mix of some of these things. So this is like playing more with computer science. So this is a thing I made to generate like different types of images and create these unique kind of like generated looks to things. So I was just kind of switching between different images here and pixelating it in different ways. So again, this is kind of a mix of computer science and art and ways to generate these different images. So I thought this was a really fun experiment, but again, you don't have to be an expert painter to be a designer. But yeah, again, it's I'll link it as well. But yeah. Alrighty. Any other questions? Or I'll let you guys go on your wonderful Saturday here. I think we're good. Well, feel free to reach out if there's anything else. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about just design in general. Another question here: how's the job market right now? Surprisingly good. I think it's difficult. There's a lot of positions right now in like user experience design or the like, UI design. Industrial design is a little bit more competitive, but yeah, I would overall say it's pretty good and a lot of opportunities for whether you want to go the startup route or you want to start something yourself, work for a small company, or again like go corporate and decide to work at the the Facebooks and Meta or the Meta or Apple of the world. So a lot of people are hiring right now for design. And I think there's definitely more of an emphasis on design recently. I think just with the pandemic, and I think there's been kind of an importance for creating these like really high quality experiences through products and other experiences. So yeah, do you know any other camps in Pittsburgh besides CMU's design camp? I can send out something to the organizers if there's any others I come across. But let me actually share the one offsite thing is I just want to share the kind of website for it, and because I think there might be some value in that. There's been a lot of students that have done that transitioning from high school to college, or even just done it in high school, and it's been really beneficial to them. So Let me share this real quick. And this is their website, if it loads. Okay, and let me just put this in the chat as well. Oops. Offsite. And I think just keeping up with them on Instagram is the best way, but this is their site. So yeah, real world skills taught by industry professionals. And it's really interesting because you start to develop a global kind of community of designers. And the cohort I recommend for you all is this Breaking into Design. So if you've never heard of industrial design, or picked up a pen and sketch or built a prototype, it's probably for you. And this is like more for designers looking to level up. But yeah, cohort one, a lot of really talented students. These are just kind of some of the work and such generated from these things. So generating color palettes, some of these basic sketching and such that you see on the left there. And yeah, so there's kind of like certification. You'll have like access to all these different, this design community. Again, here there's like generating images and knowing how to kind of create artboards. But yeah, this site kind of covers a lot of the things. So also, I linked the offsite page, but I'm also just going to link this site in particular. And again, feel free to reach out if there's any other questions with that. But yeah, it's a really, really awesome program, and I'm again happy to answer anything else. So yeah, I don't know of any other like design ones in particular in Pittsburgh, but you might might want to check out like the Museum of Contemporary Art or the Carnegie Museum of Contemporary Art or Modern Art. They might have some other things going on as well. So, but definitely, I'm a big fan of the offsite program after going through it and such. So, yeah. Well, thank you again for letting me share. Again, I've linked my Instagram in the thing. Feel free to message me with any questions you may have. But yeah, really appreciate your guys' time on a Saturday. And I hope this was a little bit helpful. So yeah.
Okay, so that concludes today's event. Thank you, Chris Ference, for preparing today's presentation and taking the time out of your day. And thank you to everyone who came to listen to what he had to say, and I hope you all learned a little bit more about the world of the design. Thank you. Bye.